welcome to part 8, or episode 8, part 3 of restoration of the 75. I'm probably going to take a break after this episode of cutting and welding old crappy Italian metal and move on to something that's a little less grueling, if I'm honest. So this one is going to be just finishing up the underside of the dash and the scuttle, which is going to open up some doors for me to do some other bits, like finishing up the electrical fixings and getting the dash back in to give me a little bit more room. I've only got a little single garage, and it very quickly fills up with stuff when you've got all sorts of bits outside of the car. So without much further ado, let's have a look. So this is a picture of the inside of the dash. You can see the reason it looks so dark and grimy looking around where I'm welding to is that's all been treated and converted because there was some surface rust, and I wanted a solid base to be welding to. So before I was welding each one, I was giving it a wire brush down to give it some nice shiny fresh metal to weld to, and then using some weld through primer on the undersides just to give it a little bit of internal protection. But you can see in this picture, this is the cavity that you can't normally see. It's hidden within the dash. So the initial skin of metal you got here is the firewall that goes through to the engine bay. On the right hand side you can see I've welded in or tacked in a panel. That is the end of the A-pillar structure, which also meshes with the underside of the screen and the inner wing and the firewall, and also the cowl top, which is always fun when there's a million joints all in one place, because as soon as you get any kind of corrosion it just goes mental, and that cavity was completely blind to anyone and rusting away in there. So I've obviously got rid of anything that's not structural. I've got rid of some things that are structural. Anything that was no good is gone. So new metal where it was required. Some of the metal is still in place when this picture was taken. That was taken out. You can just about make out a few things here. Inside the cavity there, the brightest hole, that one shouldn't be there. That is a hole that goes straight through to the engine bay, which should not be there. That's just rusted through, and I've poked through with a screwdriver, which is why it looks round. There's actually 3 more holes following the line up, the contour there. 2 of those are actually the bolt holes for the hinges for the bonnet. This whole section is actually thicker metal. It's much stronger than it looks in this picture, if I'm honest. But you know, I had to start somewhere, so this is where it was. The most obscured section was this one, because it's closed off as soon as you've welded this up. From under the engine bay you've got a very tight gap. You've probably got like maybe 3 or 4 inches to get in there with a welder, so excuse my otherwise imperfect welding, it gets slightly worse here. I was just trying to get strength and penetration into the welds whilst they're very, very blind to me. So you know, it's not going to win any beauty pageants, but I want it to be nice and strong, because I want to get this done, buttoned up, sealed off best I can, so I don't need to approach this again anywhere in the near future. Other notes from this picture: I was lucky the corrosion hasn't really spread north into the windscreen. That's all nice solid metal. You can't tell from here because I've painted over with rust converter, but that is nice solid metal there. It's not corroded at all. So I was lucky in the sense it's not gone any further north there. So like I said, this is the first section that was done, and there is the next picture here. This is from the outside. So this is looking in from the corrosion from the enclosed A-pillar end. Now this was quite corroded as well, so I've cut off everything there that was no good, because I didn't want to leave anything that was, you know, questionable. I wanted to make sure there was good strength here, because, you know, I intend on using this car and I intend on it living for a little while longer, so anything that I could get to, I'm corrected. So I've trimmed off of the end of the spot welded section here. There's a little connecting panel which I showed in the previous video on the diagrams. It's just a small section of metal that's just used as a center point for all of these sheet panels to come together and get spot welded together. I've cut that off. I've got no need for it. It's completely obscured by the wing when it's put on, and obviously because I'm seam welding everything here, it makes no odds to me. I'm not going to be spot welding it again there. and it was corroded anyway. So I did try and drill them out to swage it out, but to be honest, I ended up blunting a decent metal drill I had there, and I didn't have another one to hand, so I was like, this needs to move forward, just to keep getting progress on the car. So cut that off. That's now in with the scrap pile of metal, and I started to work in here. As you can see, there's very little access to that bit of metal from the back end. There was lots of very awkward shaping going on for this weld repair here, but I knew that it was important to get this right, so I took my time where I could, just to get the metal in place and shaped. So yeah, this is the inside panel. That's all welded in now and seamed up. So onto the next picture here. So this is from the engine bay side. The same bit of metal that's been welded in, but you can see there's very little access. In fact, the camera seems to show it's got more access. For scale, you can see the wing mirror on the left there, but that is just a 10mm bolt that's in there where the scuttle goes. So you can kind of see that, this isn't a very big space to get to, but I was making best of what I could. But I didn't want to take too much of the metal away before I got the new sections made up, because I wanted to keep roughly the same contours and curves in the metalwork, which would have been very difficult if I just took off large sections. So this is obviously just that one panel in. So let's move forward to the next picture. So this is on the inside. So from this point on, I've actually done a few sections, but because, like I mentioned, it's quite intense because it's a very awkward area to get to, lots of very blind welding. I was trying to get good metal and good adhesion and good penetration on the welds. So I didn't get great pictures of it, and certainly didn't get any videos of this because this has proven to be quite a nightmare. So this is the inside section again from the dash side. There's two more sections that were put in behind this to make good for bad sections that need to be repaired, and then this came in, and then this has been tacked all the way around at this point, and another section at the top there which just blinds off the section into the cowl top. What I would say is these are quite difficult because there's still sections of the metal behind which have seam sealer in between the panels, or panel glue, or whatever it is that they're using, and when you start to weld, even though you've cleaned up the top, it will penetrate through the metal and bring through all of that crap from the back end and dirty up your weld. So it was a bit of a nightmare because as soon as you get a dirty weld like that, pulling all the impurities in, the first thing it wants to do is just blow through the panel. It just gets very hot very quickly. You get smoke and all sorts of things, and it's not fun welding. If I'm honest, this isn't fun welding. This is necessity and budgetary is why I'm doing it. But yeah, this is all in place now and tacked in place. So that was where that picture got us to. So what we got up next here. So this is from the engine bay side. Again, this is as we move forward. You can just see the top section that was welded in from the other side. You can't see any of the dashboard section because that all is on the dashboard side and gets obscured by the dash. But you can see now that it's been seamed off, and that's now closed off to the cabin side. There's no holes there that shouldn't be there anymore. So then this is from the outside again of the initial repair, and this is just me scoping up what needs to be done here because there's some awkward angles here that need to be bent. I think I ended up doing this in 2 or 3 sections in the end, and then there was also this section which is the drain that goes down the cowling. So like I mentioned in the previous video, this bit loves rusting. It loves rotting away, and so what I've done here is this is obviously just stitched. This is just lots of spot welds holding it in place. I made up the repair sections just to give it some strength over it. I'm not too concerned about beauty of this piece. I'm going to slather this in seam sealer and primer, some epoxy primer to try and give it some strength and some some water resistance so that we can get some water draining down to the drain hole, which I've made sure is nice and clear. But obviously I'll clear this up and make this look a little nicer once I've got all the welding done and I get around to that. So this next picture, this is the outside edge. You can see the 3 sections that I made up to cover the hole that I generated from cutting out the old metal. Again, it's not got any beauty contests. Some of this stuff looks a lot taller than the welds initially were. That's because I was going over sections that were quite problematic, and ended up just making sure that there was a continuous seam as opposed to getting a nice pretty weld. A lot of this needed to be done in bursts or stitching because the metal's so thin. It's only 0.8 originally before corrosion, and what I'm putting in is only 0.9 millimeters, that is. So there's not much room for error when it comes to welding. It will quite easily blow through if you go too hard, and this is all this is at the fairly low end of the settings on my welder, so I'm trying to just make do what I got here. But this seamed up nicely, and you know, I was quite comfortable with how the metal came together. It's super strong. I'd imagine it's probably way stronger than it was originally, purely because of all the metal I've added in to try and close up all the seams. And obviously it was only spot welded before rather than seam welded. And yeah, that's the last of the repairs across this A-pillar and the front end of the cabin. So the dash can go back in now. That's all been painted up. Here's a picture of that. So that's nice and sealed. And just for completeness, here's a few more pictures of the engine bay side. This is all got with the epoxy 41 primer. Again, it's supposed to be red. I wouldn't call this red, but it doesn't matter. It's a primer. It's a nice epoxy primer, so it should be hard. And it's also got a long life of non-permeability, so that I can leave it on here for a little while before I get my nice Rosso 130 red top coat to cover over and hopefully make this look a little more seamless. As I get around, I might end up also flatting back some more of the welds, should I say wish, but to be honest I'm not too bothered at this stage because, like I said, the wing goes straight over it. So what I wanted to do off the back of this was to refit one of the wings, so especially the side of the A-pillar that I've repaired quite extensively, just to make sure that all of the recesses that I've left and recreated still align with the mounting holes, because one of the mounting holes was in one of the repair sections I took off, so that had lots of compound curves and had to recreate all of that. And I've also tried to keep the geometry all the same so that when the wing goes back on, it doesn't have any interference. It just slots straight on and the panels align. And you can see from this picture, that all aligns nicely. The door is actually slightly lower than it needs to be, but that's just my own adjustment. You know, refitting one of these doors by yourself, if you haven't done it before, is not fun. And I would thoroughly recommend using a glove in the door shut, just to give it a little bit of lift when you're mounting the bolts in. That allowed me to get a door that at least closes nicely. But yeah, in the future, when I know that this door's not going to be coming on and off so frequently, I will make sure it gets perfectly aligned so the body panels follow straight through. But I've got no worries because the wing is on and it looked great. And I also refitted the plastic trim that goes across the back of the bonnet, the back of the engine bay, at the bottom of the windscreen, just to make sure again that there wasn't any interference, and it was perfect. Fits nice and true, which is lucky because it's been sat in various garages and workshops for many years now, and I did worry it sat somewhere hot and started to warp and twist and wasn't going to refit anyway, or at least have bulges, but we're all good. So like I said, I'm going to take a little bit of a break from the welding, I think, next up. So I'm going to finish up the boot, the trunk, and get that painted up with some cellulose top coat, again 130. I'm still waiting on the thinners, otherwise I would have probably attacked this already, because then once that's painted I can start to reroute all the wiring and the pull cable for the boot release and things like that around the boot, and you know, fit the rear lights in for whatever, however long that's going to be before I start doing the outside paintwork, and also refit the tank. And before I do that, that's going to need restoring as well. So I've got quite a bit of the kit that I need for that. Maybe need some new fittings. I think there's a banjo and some rather large fuel fittings on there, which I'm going to look at and see if I can either beautify, make them look nice and tidy again, or replace them if I can figure out the thread pitches and sizing. But you know, want to make sure it's all good before it goes back in the car, because the main goal is to make sure I'm not doing the same things over and over again if I can help it. So I know that's definitely not been the case this far in this restoration over the last 9 years or so. So yeah, do it right, do it once is going to be the motto, I think. But yeah, once I've got the boot ready to roll, the fuel tank back in and the boot tidied up, I might look at getting the dash back in, and then once I've got enough well, maybe once I've got enough confidence, I'm going to start and attack the rust in the roof, which you can see here. This is rusted right around the driver's side of the roof panel itself. It is quite localized. As you can see from the top here, majority of it is over towards the sunroof side. The swaged edge that the sunroof fits inside of and the seals touch is solid and doesn't even have any surface corrosion. Miraculously, it hasn't spread down and around that curve. No idea why. I assume it's a separate bit of metal and maybe there's a bit of a seam on it, a bit of a seal on it, sorry. So I'm going to retain that if I can. Underneath this roof, I've just got a picture here. You can see there's some structure as well. The roof itself, the sunroof itself bolts too. And also there is some webbing that comes across underneath it. But you can also see that there is all these nasty patches that someone in the past of this car has tried to essentially lap these bits of metal underneath. They've done some kind of job on it. I don't know if they've even welded any of this, if I'm honest. It kind of looks like they have glued the panels underneath out of metal for some reason and then skimmed filler over the top, leaving a lot of the corroded metal in there, which has meant it's rusted through. It didn't look that bad when I got it from the underside. It looks more like deep sea rust now. But when I initially got the car, I treated it with converter and primed the roof after a skim of filler, and obviously that primer was porous, water got back down, it rotted again, and here we are. So I will look to rectify this and see what's what. Maybe some bits are worse than I expected, but that is a task for another day, and hopefully it won't be as bad as I think. And I'm really hoping that that panel is as flat as it looks. But if not, I'm just going to need to be very delicate in the way that I bend it so that it fits in with the roof. I really don't want to be doing any more than a very light skim of filler if I can help it. So here it is all tucked up under its cover because the rain is coming, and I don't really fancy it filling up with water before I get to that. So there you go. Episode 8 out. See you in number 9.